the silence that shook the stars. The grand hall of Nexus Prime stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, a monument to galactic unity that had taken 2 centuries to construct. Tonight, it blazed with light from 1,000 different suns, refracted through architectural marvels, contributed by species whose names alone required translation protocols. Director Marcus Rivera stood at the security checkpoint, watching delegates from 3,000 civilizations flow past him into the celebration beyond. He was not among them, the security officer, a being composed of living mercury that shifted between humanoid and abstract forms, regarded Rivera with what the translator interpreted as polite firmness. "The credentials you present are outdated, Director Rivera. Earth holds observer status only. This gathering is restricted to full assembly members." Rivera had expected this. He had flown 4 months through hyperspace to reach Nexus Prime, knowing he would be turned away. But he needed to be here. He needed them to see a human face one more time before everything changed. "How long has it been since Earth applied for membership?" Rivera asked quietly. The mercury being rippled, accessing records embedded in its fluid consciousness. 62 standard years. Your application was reviewed and denied. The decision stands until your species demonstrates sufficient strategic value to the assembly. Strategic value. Those 2 words had defined humanity's relationship with the galaxy for 6 decades. Rivera remembered being a child when the first contact happened, when alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit, and humanity believed they were joining a community of equals. He remembered his parents celebrating in the streets of Snow Paulo, dancing with strangers under the light of vessels that had crossed the stars. The disappointment came later. Earth's delegation had traveled to Nexus Prime with gifts, with art, with scientific discoveries. They had offered friendship and cooperation. The Assembly had responded with an evaluation report that reduced humanity to statistics and probabilities. Technological development, moderate. Cultural uniqueness, minimal. Strategic location, worthless. Economic potential, negligible. Application denied. Rivera's father had been part of that first delegation. He never spoke about it, but Rivera had found the rejection letter in his belongings after he died. The formal language couldn't hide the dismissal's cold efficiency. Humanity was not interesting enough to matter. "I understand the decision stands," Rivera said to the security officer. "But I request permission to deliver a message to the Assembly Council." The mercury being consulted with unseen authorities, its surface rippling with internal communication. After 60 seconds, it reformed into a more rigid structure. "Your message will be recorded and added to the general petition queue. Current processing time is approximately 14 years. Rivera smiled without humor. "Then I'll keep it brief." He looked directly at the security scanners he knew were recording everything. "To the Assembly Council, thank you for your rejection 60 years ago. What you meant as dismissal, we received as freedom. You'll understand soon." He turned and walked away from Nexus Prime's grand celebration, leaving the mercury being confused by the strange gratitude in his voice. The broadcast of Rivera's rejection spread across human space within hours. Neural link networks carried not just the video, but the emotional resonance of the moment. Billions of humans felt the old shame resurface, the reminder that in a galaxy of 3,000 civilizations, Earth alone stood uninvited. But something else spread through those networks too. Something the Assembly would never understand because they had never developed technology like humanity's neural mesh. It was determination crystallized into collective purpose. It was 60 years of silent work, finally ready to bear fruit. Dr. Elena Kovac watched Rivera's broadcast from her laboratory deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around her, machines hummed with power that would have seemed impossible to the Assembly's understanding of physics. She was 43 years old, and she had spent her entire adult life working toward this moment. "How long until we're ready?" asked her assistant, Dr. James Park, a young physicist whose grandfather had been on that first rejected delegation. Elena studied the readouts, flowing across holographic displays. The dark matter generators are stable. The phase shift coordinates are locked. The neural mesh network is at full integration with 97% of the human population. She looked up at Park. We're ready now. We've been ready for 5 years. We were just waiting for the right moment. And this is it. The assembly celebration? Elena nodded. They're celebrating 50,000 years of cooperation. Every member species will have representatives at Nexus Prime. Their attention will be focused inward, on their own accomplishments. They won't be watching the edges of their space. She pulled up a star chart showing the assembly's core territories. They certainly won't notice what we've been building in the dark. The machines around them represented humanity's answer to rejection. While the assembly had dismissed Earth as technologically mediocre, humanity had taken a different path. They hadn't tried to copy alien technology. They had started from completely different principles. The phase shift engines didn't move through normal space like assembly drives. They pushed ships sideways into adjacent dimensions where distance worked differently. A journey that took assembly ships 3 months could be completed by human vessels in 3 days. Asterisk. The neural mesh networks didn't use quantum entanglement for communication like assembly species. They connected human consciousness directly, creating a collective awareness that transcended space and time. When one human discovered something, every connected mind could access that knowledge instantly. In the dark matter generators. Elena's personal achievement could do something the assembly had never imagined possible. They could make things disappear. Not destroyed, not moved, simply removed from all possible methods of detection. A ship equipped with dark matter shielding became invisible to sensors, to telescopes, to gravitational measurements, to everything. It existed in a bubble of space that refused to interact with the surrounding universe. Elena had tested the technology on progressively larger objects. First a probe, then a shuttle, then a Corvette-class ship. 6 months ago, they had made an entire moon vanish for 72 hours. The lunar colony's 3,000 inhabitants had watched their home disappear from Earth's sky, invisible to every telescope and sensor humanity possessed. When the moon reappeared exactly on schedule, Elena had known they were ready for something bigger. General Tao Chun arrived at the asteroid laboratory 3 hours after Rivera's broadcast. He was 70 years old, a veteran of the border conflicts that had erupted when assembly species tested humanity's resolve in unprotected space. Those conflicts had taught him that the galaxy respected only power. Show me the deployment, Chun said without preamble. Elena brought up tactical displays. Across human space, 500 ships waited in perfect concealment. They were positioned in a sphere around the assembly's core territories, each one equipped with dark matter generators powerful enough to affect entire star systems. Each ship can create a detection void approximately 1 light-year in radius. Elena explained. When activated simultaneously, they'll make 100 star systems vanish from all sensors. The pattern they'll form will spell out Earth's coordinates in 3-dimensional space. How long can we maintain the effect? Chan asked. 15 minutes safely. 20 if we push the generators to maximum. After that, we risk permanent damage to the equipment. Chun studied the display, his expression unreadable. 15 minutes to show the galaxy that humanity can make stars disappear. He looked at Elena. Will it work? She met his gaze steadily. The mathematics is solid. The technology has been tested at every scale. Yes, General. It will work. And after? When they see what we can do? Then they'll have to decide if they want to negotiate with a species that can hide entire civilizations, or if they want to risk conflict with an opponent they can't find. Elena's voice hardened. Either way, they'll never ignore us again. Chun nodded slowly. He had fought for Earth's security his entire career. He had seen human colonies attacked by raiders who knew the assembly wouldn't intervene to protect an unrecognized species. He had attended memorial services for thousands who died because Earth lacked the political status to demand protection. Those deaths were about to mean something. Asterisk, proceed with the operation, Chun ordered. Coordinate with Admiral Okonkwo for final positioning. The demonstration will occur during the Assembly's summit ceremony. At the moment when all 3,000 species are gathered in one location, Elena felt her heart race. This is irreversible, General. Once we do this, there's no going back to anonymity. Good, Chun said. Anonymity has cost us enough. Across human space, the word spread through neural mesh networks. Not through official announcements or government broadcasts, but through the intimate connection that linked human consciousness across 40 colonies and 200 billion individuals. Everyone would experience the demonstration together, feeling it simultaneously regardless of physical location. Asterisk. In the orbital habitats above Earth, families gathered in observation lounges to watch the distant stars where the assembly celebrated. On Mars colonies buried beneath red soil, workers paused in tunnels to connect with the neural mesh. On generation ships traveling between systems, crews linked their awareness with those back home. Humanity had been building toward this moment for 60 years. Every rejected application, every ignored message, every dismissal had fueled the determination that now connected them all. They had been told they didn't matter. They had decided to prove otherwise. Director Rivera stood in his modest quarters aboard the diplomatic transport returning to Earth. He was 84 years old now, his body failing despite medical advances. He wouldn't live to see humanity's full integration into galactic society. But he would see this. Through his neural mesh connection, he felt the presence of 200 billion human minds preparing for the demonstration. He felt their collective anger at decades of dismissal, their pride in what had been built in silence, their hope that tomorrow would be different. His father's voice echoed in memory. They evaluated us like a product, Marcus. Like something to be purchased or discarded based on strategic value. Rivera closed his eyes, feeling tears on his weathered cheeks. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that dismissing someone didn't make them irrelevant. It gave them freedom to become something unexpected. Tomorrow. The assembly would see what silence had built. Tomorrow. Every ignored species in the galaxy would watch Earth demonstrate that there were powers beyond political recognition, technologies beyond collective knowledge, and strength in those who had nothing left to lose. The countdown began. 6 months until the Assembly's summit. 6 months until humanity stopped asking for permission and started demanding acknowledgement. 6 months until the stars themselves would carry Earth's message. Rivera connected fully to the neural mesh, joining his consciousness with billions of others. Together, they waited. Together, they prepared. Together, they would remind the galaxy that everyone matters, whether invited or not. The rejection letter his father had carried was framed on Rivera's wall. Insufficient strategic value, it read. He looked at those words one last time before the transport entered. Hyperspace. Strategic value was about to be redefined. Asterisk, the message written in darkness. Supreme Chancellor. Frexdal stood at the central podium of Nexus Prime's Grand Assembly Hall, his crystalline body refracting light into patterns that spoke of authority and ancient wisdom. He was 12,000 years old, a member of the crystalline collective that had helped found the Galactic Assembly when most species in the hall were still discovering fire. His voice resonated through translation fields that reached every delegate present. We gather today to celebrate 50 millennia of unity, Vrexdal announced. His words echoed in 3,000 languages simultaneously. 50,000 years since the first species came together and declared that cooperation was superior to isolation. 50,000 years of peace, prosperity, and mutual advancement. The hall erupted in celebration, expressed through countless forms. Species that communicated through bioluminescence flashed in coordinated patterns. Gaseous beings released harmonious chemical signatures. Telepathic races broadcast waves of collective joy. The diversity was magnificent, a testament to the Assembly's success in bringing together civilizations that had nothing in common except their willingness to work together. Vrextel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He had personally reviewed thousands of applications for Assembly membership during his tenure as Chancellor. He had rejected most of them. The Assembly's strength came from maintaining standards, from ensuring that only species capable of meaningful contribution were admitted. It was not cruelty. It was practical governance. His memory core contained records of every rejection he had authorized. The Krell, whose aggressive tendencies made them unsuitable for diplomatic relations. The Vorthians, whose technology was too primitive to offer value. The humans, whose strategic location and limited resources made them irrelevant to Assembly interests. He had forgotten most of those rejections within years. They were merely data points in an existence spanning millennia. Why would he remember individual disappointments when the Assembly continued to thrive without them? Admiral Sarah Okongo floated in zero gravity aboard the stealth carrier Defiance, watching holographic displays that showed the positioning of 500 human ships. She was 56 years old, and she had joined the military specifically to ensure that her children would never experience the humiliation her parents had endured. All vessels report ready status. Her tactical officer announced. Neural mesh integration is complete. 200 billion human minds are linked, and waiting. Sarah felt that vast consciousness at the edges of her awareness. Through the neural mesh, she could sense the collective emotion of her entire species. Anticipation mixed with old anger. Hope tempered by remembered rejection. Determination that burned with the intensity of 6 decades of silent preparation. She pulled up the tactical overview. 500 ships positioned in a perfect sphere around the Assembly's core territories. Each ship invisible to every known form of detection, courtesy of the dark matter generators that Dr. Kovac had spent 20 years perfecting. Each ship capable of creating a detection void that would make an entire star system vanish from sensors. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At the precise moment when Chancellor Vrextal reached the summit ceremony's climax, when all 3,000 member species were focused on celebrating their collective achievement, humanity would demonstrate what silence had built. 100 star systems would disappear. Not destroyed, not moved, simply rendered undetectable by every method the Assembly possessed. The pattern they formed would spell out Earth's coordinates in 3-dimensional space, a message impossible to misinterpret. We were here. We watched. We learned. And while you celebrated your superiority, we became something you never imagined. Commence final positioning, Sarah ordered. All ships to designated coordinates. Dark matter generators to standby power. She paused, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. This was not an act of war. It was a statement. A reminder that power took many forms, and that dismissing someone as irrelevant was dangerous arrogance. Her second-in-command, Commander Liu Chun, moved beside her. His grandfather had been General Tao Chun, the man who had authorized this operation before his death 3 years ago. The Admiral's eyes held the same determination his grandfather's had carried. My grandfather told me something before he died, Liu said quietly. He said that strength without recognition is useless, but recognition without strength is meaningless. Today we show them both. Sarah nodded. Today we show them that Earth matters. Not because they granted us permission, but because we made ourselves matter. The ceremony at Nexus Prime continued. Chancellor Vrextal spoke of the Assembly's founding principles. Ambassador K. Threx of the Hive Consortium discussed the economic prosperity that membership brought. High Priestess Zalana of the Ethereal Ascendancy offered prayers of gratitude for 50,000 years of peaceful cooperation. Not one speaker mentioned the hundreds of species that had been rejected over those same 50 millennia. Not one acknowledged the civilizations that had been deemed insufficient, primitive, or strategically worthless. The Assembly celebrated only its successes, never its dismissals. In the observation galleries, delegates from 3,000 species watched the ceremony with pride. They represented the best the galaxy had to offer, the civilizations that had proven themselves worthy of membership. They had earned their place through technological achievement, strategic importance, and cultural contribution. They had no idea that invisible ships surrounded their entire civilization, waiting to teach them about the cost of arrogance. Dr. Elena Kovac monitored the dark matter generators from her command center in the asteroid belt. Around her, dozens of scientists tracked power flows, spatial distortions, and quantum fluctuations. Everything had to be perfect. One miscalculation could cause the generators to fail, or worse, to create permanent dead zones where matter ceased to interact with normal space. Asterisk, all generators show green status. Her lead technician reported. Power distribution is optimal. Synchronization protocols are locked. Elena studied the readings with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly how dangerous this technology was. Dark matter generators worked by creating localized regions where the fundamental forces of physics behaved differently. Within those regions, electromagnetic radiation couldn't propagate, gravity couldn't pull, and quantum effects couldn't bridge the gap to normal. Space, asterisk, anything inside became invisible, undetectable, as if it had been erased from reality itself. Assembly had never developed this technology because they had never needed to. Their sensor networks were sophisticated enough to detect anything that existed in normal space. They had never considered that someone might find a way to step outside normal space entirely while remaining physically present. Asterisk. Humanity had considered it. Humanity had been desperate enough to explore every impossible option. And humanity had succeeded where the Assembly had never tried. Neural mesh integration is complete, another technician announced. All human consciousness is linked. When we activate the generators, everyone will experience it simultaneously. Elena closed her eyes and opened her awareness to the neural mesh. Instantly, she felt the presence of 200 billion human minds. Not as individual voices, but as a vast ocean of shared experience. Every human who had ever felt the sting of rejection was present in that collective consciousness. Every person who had been told they didn't matter enough. She felt children who had grown up knowing Earth was rejected. She felt elderly citizens who remembered the first contact and the hope it had brought. She felt soldiers who had fought without Assembly protection. She felt scientists who had built miracles out of desperation. They were all here, all waiting, all about to witness humanity's declaration that they would not be ignored at the moment. Arrived with the precision of atomic clocks synchronized across light years, Chancellor Vrextel reached the climax of his ceremonial speech, his crystalline form blazing with reflected light from 1,000 sources. And in this moment of celebration, let us remember that the Assembly's strength comes from our unity, from our shared commitment to peace and prosperity for all member civilizations. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo spoke a single word through the neural mesh network. Execute. 500 dark matter generators activated simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. 100 star systems vanished from every sensor in Assembly space. Stars that had burned for billions of years simply ceased to exist according to every detection method the galaxy possessed. Gravitational measurements showed nothing. Electromagnetic telescopes saw void. Quantum entanglement A-rays registered absence. Hyperspace scanners detected emptiness. The pattern was unmistakable. The missing stars formed a three-dimensional arrow pointing directly at a specific location. Earth's coordinates in the Orion Spur. Chaos erupted in Nexus Prime's Grand Assembly Hall. Alarms screamed across 3,000 different emergency frequencies. Delegates from species that had never known fear experienced it for the first time in millennia. The celebration transformed into panic within seconds. Chancellor Vrextal's crystalline form darkened with shock. "Impossible," he whispered, but his voice carried across the translation fields. "Nothing can make stars disappear. Nothing in the known universe has that capability." A junior analyst from the Sensor Guild rushed to his side, their multiple eyes wide with terror. "Chancellor, the pattern. The missing stars form coordinates. They're pointing to a location in what we designated as irrelevant space. Show me." Vrextal commanded. The holographic display materialized above the assembly hall, visible to all 3,000 delegates. 100 stars missing from the galactic map, their absence forming an arrow that pointed to a small yellow star in an unremarkable spiral arm. The Sensor Guild analyst's voice shook. "Those are the coordinates of Sol System. The humans. The species we rejected 62 years ago." Silence fell across the assembly hall. 3,000 civilizations stared at the display, understanding dawning with the weight of worlds. The species they had dismissed as strategically worthless had just demonstrated technology that made the assembly's 50,000 years of advancement seem primitive. Across human space, 200 billion minds experienced the moment together through the neural mesh. They felt the shock rippling through assembly space. They felt the fear that came with suddenly realizing that power existed outside their control. They felt the satisfaction of watching arrogance shatter against reality. Director Marcus Rivera experienced it from his medical bed on the transport returning to Earth. His body was failing, but his mind remained sharp, linked to the vast consciousness of his species. Tears streamed down his face as he felt what every human felt: vindication. "We matter," he whispered to the empty room. "After 60 years, they finally understand that we matter." The dark matter generators maintained the effect for exactly 15 minutes. Long enough for every assembly species to understand what they were witnessing. Long enough for their best scientists to attempt and fail to detect the missing stars through any known method. Long enough for the implications to sink deep into their collective consciousness. Then, precisely on schedule, the stars returned. 100 systems reappeared simultaneously, their light flooding back into sensors as if they had never been gone. The arrow pattern remained visible for 3 seconds after the stars returned, a final emphasis on the message. "We were here. We watched. We can make you vanish." Chancellor Vrextal stood frozen at his podium, his crystalline structure flickering with processing algorithms that struggled to comprehend what had occurred. Around him, delegates shouted questions in 3,000 languages. Military commanders demanded explanations. Scientists declared the event impossible, even as sensor logs proved it had happened. "Establish communication with Earth immediately," Vrextal ordered. His voice carried the authority of 12,000. Years of existence, but underneath was something he had rarely experienced: uncertainty. The communication channels opened. For 60 years, humanity's messages to the assembly had been ignored or deflected to automated systems. Now, for the first time, the Supreme Chancellor himself initiated contact. Director Rivera's face appeared. On the holographic display, broadcast simultaneously to all 3,000 species in the assembly hall. He looked old and tired, but his eyes burned with purpose that transcended his failing body. "Chancellor Vrextal," Rivera said with careful formality, "thank you for taking my call. I believe we have much to discuss." Vrextal struggled to find words. His species had existed for millions of years. He personally had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Yet in this moment, facing an elderly human who should have been beneath his notice, he felt something unprecedented. He felt small. Director Rivera, Rextal began, his translation field struggling to convey his emotional state. What you have demonstrated is beyond our understanding. The technology required to make star systems undetectable is centuries beyond anything we believed possible. Rivera smiled without warmth. You evaluated us 62 years ago, Chancellor. You determined that humanity possessed moderate technological development, minimal cultural uniqueness, and negligible strategic value. He leaned forward slightly. Would you like to revise that assessment? The assembly hall remained silent. 3,000 civilizations waited for their chancellor's response. What do you want? Rextal asked finally. Full assembly membership? A seat on the High Council? Access to our trade networks and technology exchanges? Rivera's smile faded. No, Chancellor. We don't want your membership. The statement sent shockwaves through the assembly. Species that had spent centuries working toward membership status couldn't comprehend rejecting what they had achieved. And what? Vrextal demanded. Why demonstrate this capability if not to demand recognition? To deliver a message, Rivera said quietly. For 60 years, you ignored us. You deemed us unworthy of your attention. You gave us no choice but to develop independently, to find our own path, to create technologies you never imagined because we couldn't access yours. He paused, and through the neural mesh, every human felt his words as their own. You taught us that we had to make ourselves matter. So we did. The dark matter technology you witnessed is only one of several breakthroughs we've achieved in isolation. We can move faster than your ships. We can communicate across distances you consider impossible. We can do things with physics that your scientists declare theoretical. And you're not sharing this technology? Asked Ambassador Cathrex, her insectoid form quivering with frustration. Not with the assembly, Rivera confirmed. But there are hundreds of species you've rejected over the millennia. Species you deemed insufficient, primitive, or strategically worthless. We're offering them a different option. The implications hit the assembly like a physical force. Humanity wasn't seeking to join the existing power structure. They were creating a new one. This is a threat, Rextal said, his crystalline form darkening with anger. You're attempting to undermine the assembly's authority. No, Rivera replied. We're reminding you that authority must be earned through respect, not demanded through position. For 50,000 years, you've decided who matters and who doesn't. You've determined which species deserve attention and which should be ignored. His voice hardened. You are wrong about us, Chancellor. And you're wrong about hundreds of others. We're going to prove it. The transmission ended. Director Rivera's image vanished from the holographic display, leaving 3,000 stunned civilizations staring at empty space. Chancellor Vrextal stood at his podium, processing what had occurred. In 15 minutes, humanity had demonstrated technology that challenged the Assembly's fundamental understanding of physics. In 5 minutes of conversation, they had rejected the very membership that species fought for centuries to achieve. And in doing so, they had exposed the Assembly's greatest weakness, arrogance. Across human space, the celebration began. 200 billion minds connected through the neural mesh experienced collective joy that transcended individual happiness. They had been dismissed as irrelevant. They had been ignored for 60 years. And they had responded by becoming something the galaxy couldn't ignore. In his medical bed, Director Marcus Rivera felt his consciousness beginning to fade. His body had reached its limits. But through the neural mesh, he felt the triumph of his entire species. He felt vindication for his father and for every human who had ever been told they didn't matter. His last thought, shared with 200 billion minds, was simple. We showed them. We finally showed them. 5 years passed. The new collective grew to include 200 species, all former rejects of the Galactic Assembly. Humanity shared its technologies freely with these civilizations, asking nothing in return except mutual cooperation and respect. The dark matter generators, the phase shift engines, the neural mesh networks all became available to species that the Assembly had deemed unworthy. The galaxy's power balance shifted. The Assembly remained the largest and oldest political entity, but it no longer held monopoly on advanced technology or political influence. The new collective existed as a parallel structure, neither opposing nor subordinate to the Assembly. Chancellor Vreg Stahl sent one final message to Earth before he retired from public service. It reached Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, who had succeeded Rivera as Director of Human Galactic Affairs. The message was brief. "We were wrong about you, Dot." Sarah read it in her office overlooking Earth's blue oceans. She thought about her parents, who had watched the first contact and believed humanity was joining a community of equals. She thought about the 60 years of rejection that had followed. She thought about what silence and determination had built. She composed her response with care. "No, Chancellor. You were right. We were strategically worthless 60 years ago. We had nothing to offer that you valued. But you made a mistake. You assumed that assessment would remain true forever. You forgot that dismissing someone doesn't make them irrelevant. It gives them freedom to become something you never expected." She paused, then added a final line. "Thank you for teaching us that lesson. It made us stronger than we ever would have been as members of your assembly." The message sent. Sarah turned to look at Earth, across the planet, across 40 colonies, across 200 billion human minds connected through the neural mesh. The same understanding resonated. They had been rejected. They had been ignored. They had been dismissed as unworthy. And in response, they had made the universe remember their name, not by asking for permission, not by seeking approval, but by becoming undeniable. Dot, the new collective's emblem, appeared on screens across human space. It showed 100 stars arranged in an arrow pattern, pointing outward from Earth. Beneath it, a simple phrase in every human language. "Everyone matters. Everyone." It was a promise, a declaration, and a reminder that in a vast and ancient galaxy, the most dangerous thing you can do is tell someone they don't matter. Because they might believe you. They might work in silence. They might build miracles from rejection. And when they return, they won't be asking for permission anymore. Asterisk.